Infinite Audit friends. Welcome to the 16th editions of Infinite Audit Talks. In this episode, we will discuss about fraud detection and investigation audit. Investigation activities are carried out in the form of investigative assignments covering the smooth running of development, including cross-sectoral programs, corruption prevention, price adjustments audit, claims audit, investigative audit of irregularities that are indicated to be detrimental to state finance, audits of calculating state financial losses, and providing expert information. Well, let's start. I have an opening questions. What is basically fraud detection or fraud itself?
Okay, thank you, Bunga, for the questions. And hello, Infinite friends. Welcome back to Infinite Audit Talk English edition. I'm always happy to do this in English, especially since this is an opportunity for me and Bunga to learn how to speak English better. Okay, and basically, what is fraud? Fraud is deliberate, intentional act, or either way or the other way, failure to act with the intention of obtaining gain, but it must be unethically, unfairly, unauthorizedly, or unlawfully, either for oneself or for a group of people. So it can be either give the perpetrator a gain or deny a right to the victim. The purpose of fraud may be monetary gain or other benefits. Fraud can either violate law or may cause loss of asset, for example, money. That is why the act should be prevented, detected, or corrected. Fraudulent activity can be carried out by one individual, multiple individuals, or even like organization-wide by an organization. In finance itself, fraud can take many forms. For example, claiming false expense, like travel expense. Someone can claim an expense, but they never really pay for that. So yeah, that's the example of fraud in finance. Fraud has become a global problem since way before and even until now. The biggest fraud ever uncovered is Enron. You may heard that, right? The Enron scandal was a major reason behind the famous Sylvana Act. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all about fraud I know. And then I want to ask you about okay, the other way. What is investigation audit? Bunga, sorry, you were on mute.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Mbak. Yeah, interesting. Investigative audit is basically a process of searching, finding, collecting, and analyzing, and also evaluating the evidence systematically by competent and independent parties to reveal actual facts or events regarding the indication of criminal acts of corruptions and other specific purposes in accordance with the applicable regulation or law. Basically, investigative audit targets are activities in which deviations from the applicable regulation are suspected. The scope of investigative audit is a limitation on the locus, tempo, and other matters relevant to the activities that are the object to investigate, or maybe something that's regarding the investigative audit. In public sector, this is closely related to the state financial loss calculation audit. The state financial loss calculation audit basically aim to express an opinion regarding the value of state financial losses caused by the deviation from the result of the investigation and used to support the litigation actions or issues. And the audit of the calculation of state financial losses is basically carried out to fulfill the request to the investigators or maybe law enforcement officers. However, this kind of audits must be carried out with the investigative approach by applying the concept and principles of investigative auditing. The thing that distinguishes it from an investigative audit is basically the auditor in this kind of audit no longer needs to determine the deviation hypothesis, because the deviation has been formulated by the investigator and the evidence must be obtained through the investigator. This is called as a pro justicia or pro justicia. The target of this audit is basically calculation of the value of state's financial losses using methods that can be accounted for by the expertise. In this case, of course, investigator or maybe the investigative auditor. Yeah, that's maybe what I have in mind, and my aim. What are the reason people commit to the fraudulent action?
Okay, thank you, Bunga, for the questions about why people commit fraud or the driver for fraud. So I read it somewhere that the criminologist Donald, wait, let me remember his full name, Donald Christie, identified three conditions that must be present for an ordinary person like us to commit fraud. The first one is pressure, the second one is opportunity, and the third one is rationalization, or famously called as the fraud triangle. Okay, the first one is pressure. The person who commit fraud usually under certain pressure. For example, gambling addiction, health problem, which to take care it need a lot of money, pressure from the family to live a luxury life, or having debt could be the reason that people think that they have the pressure to do a fraud. And then the second one is that people must have the opportunity to commit fraud. This is generally because they think that the entity, the organization have weak countermeasures or internal controls, such as the lack of oversight. They think that there is an opportunity for them to gain something, so why not take this opportunity? And then the last one is rationalization. People must be able to rationalize the act of fraud in their own mind. They think it's okay to commit fraud. For example, they think that I deserve it. Everyone also do the fraudulent acts. Or the other reason, I'm doing it for my family. It's okay because my family needs it. Or, okay, I will pay it back later, for example. Yeah, so we have that rationalization in our mind that let us think that commit a fraudulent act is okay. Okay, I think that's all I have in mind. And then I want to ask you a question. Since we are auditors, I want to ask you about the role of internal audit unit in supervising fraud. What do you think?
Thank you, Mayim. Well, what is the role of internal audit in supervising fraud? Such a challenging questions, even though I am an internal auditor. Well, internal audit is responsible to answer to help management in overcoming fraud by doing testing and evaluation, as well as control of possible risk cheating occurs from, of course, various segments, various aspects, various dimension of human resource, and approach in order for investigation includes a few things as maybe data and evidence analysis, how we formulate hypothesis, test hypothesis with the evidence advance, and how basically we filter and improve the hypothesis that we already built. A few steps need to pass in testing fraud between the evidence that we have. A few steps need to pass in testing fraud between basically the steps that we have to follow. Maybe the examiner document have to be really tested, and also we have to have a neutral witness, of course, from people that we trust, or maybe from the person or unit or maybe entity that we do really understand and also trust, can give a neutral witness. Of course, this is especially mostly have by the third parties. And the next one is how we as an internal auditor unit can use the whistleblowing system, or maybe can build the control environment that can at least reduce the potency of the fraud. Because through the whistleblowing, we have two at least advantages. First, people know that we have the system, so they are try or tend to reduce the potency of doing fraudulent actions. Or the second things is about how basically we can really watch, we can really see clearly the right condition, the real conditions from our organization, since we can grab the information about fraud from any parties. Yeah, that's maybe my answer. And next, I would like to ask you why fraud is such a challenging problem for an organization.
Okay, thank you, Bunga, for such a challenging questions about the challenging problem that is fraud. Okay, why fraud is such a challenging problem for our organization or for an organization? So, I read somewhere the website called counterfraud.gov.au, since I want to study in Australia, so I learn a lot about like the law, the reference that I usually read is from Australia. So the first one, they said that fraud is often underestimated and unchecked, since usually we don't think that there is a fraud in an organization. We usually don't think that we need to check them. We need to check further the organization, the division, or the people, the person. So usually because we think that there is no fraud there, or we don't think that if a fraud happen, it must be something big. So we usually underestimate the scale of fraud, or we usually like to dismiss the probability of fraud itself. So yeah, I think that's why it becomes a big challenge for us, because people tend to underestimate it. And then the second one is about fraud is common. So because we think that everyone makes a fraud, or fraud is everywhere basically. So I think that makes the organization think that it's okay. Fraud is okay because everyone, everywhere, fraud is basically there. The fraud is exists. Fraud exists everywhere. So it makes fraud become a challenging problem, because the the realization that it is such a bad thing, it's evil, it's not basically exists in every people, everyone. So yeah, I think the second one is because fraud is common, that it becomes more challenging. And then the third one is because the one who commit frauds are diverse, creative, and adapt quickly. So they have a lot of like techniques and method to do fraud, and it's hard to like prevent them or detect them or like correct them, because they have a lot of ways to do fraud. And the person who commit fraud is like basically come from many backgrounds, and they also adapt quickly when a method to prevent it is exists. They try to like get another way to do a fraud. And then I have to mention that sometimes fraud is also an organized crime. It's become more serious that it is not just an individual does fraud, but it also can be like multiple individuals or even like an organization do a fraud. So yeah, that's become much more serious that now it becomes an organized crime. And then the last one I want to mention that fraud also become increasingly complex. We have technology, we have a lot of advancement that makes fraud can appears in many ways. So it it become much more complex, and we as auditor needs to like learn how to like prevent them, and it's not easy at all. So that's why it's become a challenging problem for our organization. I think that's all from me, and then I want to ask you about what are the challenges. I still want to elaborate about the challenges. So, what are the challenges of the forensic work that need to be mitigated? What do you think?
Wow, it's basically not only challenging, but it's literally hard questions. Um, what are the challenges forensic audit that need to be mitigated? Well, um, maybe I will take an example. I'll take a forensic accounting point of view as an example, and the challenge that maybe forensic accounting will face in the future is of course technology. When conducting forensic activities, we are dealing with a lot of data because of the transaction, mostly digitally. We must have to have ability to analyze the data to look the patterns and also the evidence of fraud. We don't have skills, in case we don't have that kind of skills or competencies that can be used to review the data. To be honest, in the near future we can do much, we can do maybe anything. I do believe that the rise of the financial crime in Indonesia is considered to be high threat in the future, especially for agencies or companies that are often harmed by these criminal acts. For forensic accountants, in the future, the challenges faced are also increasingly dynamic due to the technological developments in this era. In detecting fraud that has developed into the digital realm, various perspectives of knowledge and competencies, especially in digital fields, need to be mastered. Need to be mastered not only by the auditors, but also by the forensic accountants in the very near future. The use of the forensic accounting in Indonesia is more emphasized on disclosure of corruptions. In theory and practice, forensic accounting actually has more uses than that. The similarity is that it is used to prepare evidence for the litigation process or the evidentiary process in court. Well, yeah, that's basically little things I know about it. And the next question says, can you tell me about the fraud reporting system that you know, and how is the follow-up?
Okay, thank you, Bunga, about the fraud reporting system and the follow-up done to it. I think I want to mention about the one I know. I exactly know because it is the one that happened in our organization, aka the Ministry of Finance. It's called WISE, or Whistle Blowing System. It is basically an application provided by the Ministry of Finance for those of people who have information and want to report an act that indicates a violation that occur within the Ministry of Finance, or the violation that is done by people in the Ministry of Finance. And one of the things that I want to mention is that people don't have to worry about revealing the identity, because our Ministry of Finance will keep your personal identity as the whistleblower. So you don't have to worry, because of course is the information, the material you report instead of your identity. And then I want to also mention about that the complaints are administered through the whistleblowing system will be followed up by the public complaint manager in the investigation inspectorate. Through the procedure of the first one, the team will analyze and then the follow up the complaint and also submitted the review memo to the inspector of investigation, or in bahasa we mention it, we call it as EB, Inspektorat Bidang Investigasi, no later than 30 days after they were submitted. So I think after that we can like going through a follow-up procedure. For example, if we need to do an interview, then we have to perform interview, then yes, you can call the person you want to interview, and then if you want to like collect more evidences, that you can just collect the evidences you need. So yeah, I think that's how the follow-up done to the complaints or to the potential fraud in the Ministry of Finance. And then I think I want to ask you the final questions about the difference between forensic audit and investigative audit, since you know those terms usually interchangeable, but do you think they are the same or different? What do you think?
Well, yeah, of course, both of them are very, very different. While, of course, both of the parties have a responsibility to detect fraud, the level of responsibility is, basically very different. To clarify, auditing is a process to determine whether the reported financial position and the performance of a company is presented correctly and complies with a certain standards. Auditors support the financial system by conducting audit of the financial statement to ensure that the company management reports capturing a true picture of the company financial position and of course performance. An auditor has an obligation to safeguard the public and provide comfort around financial statement reporting and also disclosure. Forensic audit investigative basically like a certain data and information to identify facts related to the suspected fraud. From the fraud allegation to the settlements, of forensic accountants applies their investigative skills. At times, this basically may include supporting asset recovery, performing litigation support, and preparing a court reports, testifying in a court as an expert witness, and bringing a company allegation to law enforcement. Keep in mind that forensic accountants are not in the interest of reaching a general opinion about the financial statements as a whole. The purpose of the forensic accountants is more specific and determined by the scope of the service communicated in the agency letter. So now, what about the difference between a forensic audit and an investigative audit? Basically, a forensic accountants may perform a fraudulent audit of the financial statements. An expert can perform tasks and also procedures that can look deeper for the common fraud and error based on the training and experience. Unlike the investigative audit, forensic experts do not provide a level of assurance that financial statements are free of the material fraud. Instead, they report the procedures performed, findings, observation, and also recommendation. So yeah, dear Infinite Audit friends, this is basically the end of the session. today. We do really enjoy to have a session with you guys today. And yes, if you have any ideas or maybe suggestion or maybe inputs, just throw your thoughts below on the comment section. And yeah, I do really appreciate your attention, and also see you on the next session.